We are going to be talking about a gadget that allows you to take something like this and turn it into something like this, a bullpup. So this is the A3 Tactical Triad, and essentially it is a chassis system that allows you to turn some variants into a fully fledged bullpup. I wanted to do a setup with it using the BRN 180 upper. It actually works with a lot of other uppers as well, which also reminds me, I will have a list for everything that we're going to be discussing. The first link in the description. The A3 Tactical is a chassis system that will turn some variants into a bullpup. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it doesn't work with all variants. The biggest deciding factor is they have to be bufferless. However, it does work with a bunch of them, such as the Fax and Firearms ARAC or the ARAK uppers. They also have a chassis that works with the PSA Jackal uppers. They have one that works with the CMMG Descent, the Foxtrot Mike FM15, the Matador Arms Mat 9 uppers. If you guys don't remember those, I did a video, I think in 2023 or 2022, I don't remember which, where we actually did Matador Arms 9mm uppers. And then for the purposes of today's video, we have the BRN 180 Gen 2 upper. Now, something that you should keep in mind, I actually have the new Gen 3 BRN 180 upper here. Now, this one is a prototype and it doesn't work right. I am still waiting for the actual production model to come in. That way we can get the video done, but that's essentially what the Gen 3 looks like. The reason I even bring this up is these chassis, at least as of right now at the publishing of today's video, do not work with the Gen 3 BRN 180 uppers. I've tried, it didn't fit. When I first got this, I opened up the box, and in the box, it comes with the chassis itself, all of the small parts that are needed to assemble everything. It also comes with different sized butt plates, which are gonna be very, very important to talk about here in a minute. It also comes with a Rise Armament RA140 trigger, and then it comes with the instruction manual if you don't want to watch the video. Now, there's only two things that you're going to need aside from one of the uppers to make this thing work. From what I understand, from what other people have said on Reddit, it needs to be the kind that has a removable trigger guard, otherwise it might not work. At least for this one, you're gonna need a low profile bolt catch. We'll get into more detail about that here in a minute. I do have info about that bolt catch over its list if you wanna check that out. But it'll make sense right now because we're gonna go up close. I'm gonna show you how this thing is set up as of right now, and I'm gonna show you a little bit of some of the nuances and how it works and some things that you should look out for. All right, so let's go over what all I've done to this so far, and then we'll be able to talk about how this guy actually works. So I'm using the BRN 180. This is the Gen 2 upper. For my muzzle device right here, we are using the Blackout Defense. This is a hybrid flash hider / comp, but it doesn't put out a big fireball or anything, but it has the chemo on it. And I like the chemo because one, you know, obviously if you have suppressors that have the chemo adapter on it, it goes on. Or if you have to go to, say, an indoor range and you don't want to blow the ears out of everyone to your right and your left, this is a JMAC blast forwarding device with the chemo adapter. I'll have some info over at Parts List about that if you want to check it out. But I like this, and I try to keep most of my pin welded muzzle devices chemo. That way I can just swap this onto different, and then when I get any suppressors, I can do the same thing. Right here, we have the Die-Free Co. forward grip. This literally just released, I don't know, maybe a week or two ago. It came in the mail and I threw it on. Moving on back here, we have the Holosun Ames, and this one is the green dot variant. Let's see if you guys can see it. The focus wants to blow it out, but it's the green dot, and I found that this mount was the perfect height for my cheek weld. When I first got this, I was kind of having a weird problem of trying to find the right height for my optics. So I'd throw different optics on, one would be too low, and then I picked up this carry handle / riser that goes on here. This is also made by A3 Tactical. We will talk more about this because I got bones to pick about it, but I ended up not needing it once I threw that red dot on it. And then for the trigger, I'm not using the trigger that actually came with it, which was this guy. This is their Rise Armament 140 trigger. This is a fairly popular trigger. They're not expensive. They're only around 80 to 100, somewhere in that range. There's a reason it's not in here, which we'll cover when we get to the shooting footage. But instead, right now, I have the Blackout Defense drop-in trigger in here. As I said, this will all make sense later. So how does this little fellow work? You notice here, here, and here, we have takedown pins. These are just like the takedown pins on a standard AR, except they're not captured. When you push them out, they come completely out. These two go through the upper receiver at their lugs. And in this one, there is a lug that is attached to the handguard. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have the chassis system with the lower receiver installed. You can actually see right here where your buffer tube would go. This is where your mag well is and everything like that. And then on the upper, the only thing I had to attach was this little piece that's right here. As I mentioned, this allows that front takedown pin to go into place. It's a little crooked, but it works. Now, something to keep in mind, especially if you're gonna get like the BRN 180 variant, I tried putting a standard bolt catch on here when I put this thing together. The problem is right here is where the bolt catch kind of sits when the upper's attached. And the problem is with a standard bolt catch, it was simply too thick. And I couldn't get the bolt catch to actually move because of how thick it was. So what I had to do was I had to get this thin one from, this actually goes to a PSA Jackal. I'll have information at the list, but PSA does sell these separately. My chassis didn't come with this bolt catch. And I did notice on their website that they say, hey, you can add a bolt catch for like 10 bucks or something like that. I don't know, but that's kind of stupid to not include that, because if you need it, just include it. It's honestly, I guarantee you these parts don't cost them more than a buck or two. They should have just thrown that in, but nonetheless, your lower receiver is sitting exactly right here. And I'll throw up a photo from their tutorial video so you can see it. It sits into place. If we zoom in, this little guy right here, you can actually adjust the play in your trigger, but when I pull on the trigger up here, it actually moves this guy. I don't really want to drop the hammer on a lower, but I'll put my finger here. See? You can actually adjust the play in your trigger. I have mine completely against like the wall so that there's no pre-travel or anything like that, but you can kind of adjust it to how you see fit. A couple other cool things that they've done on here is it's not fully ambi, but it's kind of ambi. So on the right side, you have the magazine release, that is it. On the left side, they've got a contraption here. This is all included in the package that allows you to have an ambidextrous mag release. And that's gonna help because you'll be able to just knock the mag out with your left hand as you insert the other one. And then your bolt lock, bolt release, things like that. Another thing to note about these chassis systems. Yes, they have them for all the different types of uppers that are out there, but on each variant for the upper, they also have them available as a pistol variant or a rifle variant. And in the box, you get two different size butt stock extensions. So you get a shorter one and then you get this longer one. And you're gonna wanna know more about this because that's gonna decide whether or not you're breaking the law or not when you decide to put yours together. So earlier I mentioned that it came with two different sized butt plates. Why is that important? In order to have a law-abiding bullpup, if you're gonna have a 16-inch upper, or if you're gonna have like a 13.9 or a 14.5 pin welded upper, you have to use the bigger butt plate in order for it to meet the overall length requirements of 26 inches. So even though the barrel's 16 inches, if you go under that overall length, it's now gonna be subject to NFA tax. So keep those things in mind. Now they do have a chassis that is a pistol chassis that doesn't have this, and then it doesn't matter what length your barrel is because it's not a rifle at that point. Just a couple of things to keep in mind in case you're having trouble choosing whether or not you want to get like the pistol or the rifle variant. Now with this one, as I mentioned, this is a 13.9-inch pin welded as I showed you up close. And as you can see in this B-roll right here, it meets the overall length requirements. So that's always a good thing. So now that we've kind of talked about all that product knowledge, how the heck does this thing even shoot? So on my very first range trip with this guy, I actually had a fairly good range experience. Everything almost ran flawlessly. I only had one malfunction and it was almost like a failure to eject or a failure to extract, I'm not really sure. But yeah, as you can see in the footage, everything was running good except for the one shell casing that kind of got caught. And because the upper was new and because the chassis was new, I sometimes expect that when you're breaking something in. That's usually not a big deal or a red flag. But then I went on my second range trip and I started having a totally different problem. You see, what would happen is the bolt would cycle, chamber another round, but the trigger would not reset. All right, malfunctions. Trigger didn't reset again. again. At first, it started out where it would be like maybe 1 or 2 rounds per magazine, and then it got to where it was almost every single round. The trigger wouldn't reset. Checked the cassette style trigger inside the lower receiver to make sure that the set screws were perfectly tight. Everything was good to go. Went back to the range, then I ran into more problems. Whoa, that didn't sound good. Same problems as I had before, where sometimes it would chamber around and not reset the trigger, but I also experienced hammer follow, which can be scary when you're not doing it on purpose. Once the hammer follow hit, I yanked that trigger out. I threw in a blackout defense trigger. They are one of my top favorite triggers of all time. Put it in, I put everything back together, and I went back to the range, and then this happened. Man, this thing started running insanely well. I had 0 malfunctions. I tested it with a bunch of different magazines and all ran perfectly fine. Every single time the bolt locked open on the last round. Now the recoil impulse on here is actually not bad at all. And obviously, typically with ARs, recoil isn't a thing. And when we talk about recoil with ARs, we're talking if it's jumpy. Not that it's kicking. We're just saying, hey, how flat can we keep this while it shoots? And this thing with the hybrid flash hider that I have on here, this thing shot phenomenally well. And it was easy to shoot fast, it was easy to shoot accurately, and it's just as accurate as it would be if it was on a standard lower receiver with a standard buttstock and everything. So let's talk about the pros and the cons real quick. The first pro is for a conversion, this actually looks really good. I mean, I think some of you may agree, in the past when we've seen other Bullpup chassis, they've been kind of ugly. They kind of just don't look like they belong. The next pro is it'll take something that is approximately this size and cut it down to something of this size. Next pro is most of the weight is back here at the rear and the front of it is very light. So coming up from low ready is very easy and very fast. The next pro is this is far cheaper than actually going out and buying a Bullpup. One of the more affordable, I guess, decent Bullpups that I've seen is like the Springfield Helion. I have a little bit of experience with it. I don't have one. I shot my buddies. Those things are like 1,700-ish doll hairs, if not a little bit more. And these can be had for quite a bit cheaper. Next pro is because this is just using a standard lower when a chassis system, you could easily swap calibers by just simply getting a different caliber upper. And the one thing that I really do appreciate about this is the familiarity of the controls in the manual of arms. And what I mean by that is, for example, I was telling you, I shot my buddy's Springfield Helion and I just didn't like it. The trigger was really heavy, it was really mushy, and the safety and the mag release, all that stuff was just odd. And at least with this one, you still have your same safety selector up here. You still have a very similar trigger pull, but then when you want to change your mags, you just simply grab your spare mag, bump this mag release, put your new mag in, hit your bolt release, and then go back. Now let's get into the cons and the criticisms. I will say this, they are kind of pricey for what they are. On average, they're about $650-ish. Now, obviously, if you go over to the list, I have something that takes quite a bit off the price. The thing that bothers me about that is there's no option to get this chassis without that trigger. And I think that that's kind of part of the reason why they cost what they cost. I mean, that trigger's not very expensive. They're like 80 to 90. But if they would just sell a chassis without that trigger and allow you to choose your own, they could easily knock 80, 90 bucks off the price. Since we're speaking of the triggers, something I did notice is that this trigger mechanism that's up here that goes all the way back here adds weight to the trigger. Let me show you what I'm talking about up close real quick. So let me show you this trigger situation really quick. So in here, as I mentioned, I have a blackout defense trigger. On their triggers, you can either choose 3.5 pound, 4 pound, or I think even 4.5 pound. I don't remember what the weight of this one specifically is, but it won't matter because let me show you what I'm talking about. We're gonna put this on here. And I don't know if you guys can read that, but that pulled at 6.5 pounds. 2 to 2.5 pounds of additional weight to the trigger. And that kind of sucks. The next con is their accessories are very expensive. Now this accessory piece, I actually paid for it with my own money and I paid full price, but this is their riser handle. How much do you think something like this guy cost? Just take a guess, because you're gonna be wrong. They want $150 for this piece of aluminum. That is insane. This thing should not be more than 40 or 50 bucks. Just saying, that is a big con. This next con isn't really a con, it's kind of more of a wish. So the thing is, with their chassis systems, if I wanted one for my PSA Jackal, I gotta get a whole nother chassis system. And I get it, the uppers are different. But I wish they would make like some kind of chassis system where it's like, okay, you can buy it as a base kit for, say, whatever upper that you wanna use. But if you wanted to use a different upper, you can just order these little pieces and use the same chassis piece. I know they can't make it 100% universal because the uppers are different in a bunch of different ways, but they could make it in a way where you have one chassis, so you spend the $600 once, and then you might buy like a $50 to $100 conversion kit if you wanted to throw a different brand upper on it. That's not really a con, that's just more of a, I really wish it was like that. So knowing all that, I said earlier, we're gonna answer the question if this is something I would buy with my own money, knowing what I know now. Now keep in mind, I have a sample size of one. The reason that's very important is in any video I do here on YouTube, sometimes I get, and they work phenomenally well. And then sometimes I get other products and they fall apart. The reason I bring that up is sometimes I get the one that works great and everybody else has a horrible experience, or vice versa. And so take everything I say in these videos as a grain of salt, okay? And I will say this, of most of the bullpups that I have fired, they always leave something to be desired, at least for me. And what I mean by that is they typically have very awkward manual of arms. I mean, the bullpup, the way it's designed, it's not gonna be, you're not gonna be able to do speed reloads very easily. And especially with things like the Springfield Helion, like they have completely different safeties, completely different bolt catches, the way you charge it, the way you release the bolt, lock the bolt, everything's different on that thing. And this at least keeps the majority of your manual of arms very similar. And so that is something I greatly appreciate about this. And because of that, I will say this is probably the most enjoyable bullpup that I've had the pleasure of testing and evaluating, at least so far. So if I was someone who already owned one of those types of uppers that these chassis are compatible with, and I just wanted to have something that I could convert back and forth from something like this to something like this and experience what a bullpup is like, this would definitely be one of the more affordable ways to do it, given that you already have the upper. So yes, I would buy it again, knowing what I know now, but with a caveat. The caveat is, they need to drop the Rise Armament triggers. They're just they're trash. I've had bad experiences with them. My buddy Mike from Tactical Considerations had a bad experience with them. It's mainly the 140 trigger. I don't know why, but that is the main trigger that has given me and my buddy Mike issues. So the reason I say the caveat is it sucks to go spend $600 on one of these and then have to go spend another couple hundred on a trigger because the trigger that it comes with sucks. So the caveat is, if they'll drop the Rise Armament triggers, yes, I would buy this with my own money. But as long as they're gonna keep that going, it's just kind of a deal killer because of the price and you get a crappy trigger. But that's just my 2 cents. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are down in the comments section. Do you think this is a stupid thing to do? Or is this something that you would like to do? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and I'll do my best to read your comments and try to reply to some of you guys. Until next time, I love you and you guys stay sexy.